Well, when does the treatment become accountable for it not being ready for the person? Like, how is that? Like, we blame people. It's this thing with substance use and mental health that we just blame the person. If this was cancer and somebody cancer came back, are we going to punish them for that? Oh, there you go. Cancer came back. Like, come on.
Welcoming to Knockin' Doors Down, Guy Felicella. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah, really excited to speak with you. Like I was saying, the power of Twitter before we recorded. I'm like, oh man, I got to talk to this gentleman. We got to talk to this gentleman. Sorry, Mikey.
Yeah, I'm here too. Jeez.
I don't mean to be a dick, but boy, what a story. Let's talk before we get into your addiction history. What are you doing now? I mean, of course, lockdown, it's a little bit more of a challenge, but just out there spreading the good word and about addiction, substance abuse, and really a different way of looking at substance abuse and recovery.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, now I work for the Provincial Overdose Emergency Response Center. I also work for the BC Centre on Substance Use. And I also work for Vancouver Coastal Health Regional Addiction Program, but I've also got my own company where I public speak openly in high schools, universities, educating people on both aspects and all platforms such as harm reduction and recovery initiatives, just to let people know, like, hey, listen, if you're struggling, like, we're here to help. And so the response from, I think my biggest passion is going in and educating our youth. I think that is the most important thing. And they enjoy hearing it from me, not from some police officer that's going to come in and arrest them for doing it.
Which one of you does drugs? Raise your hand.
Right? I am not going to speak up. Just for people know, when guys refer to BC, he's up in Canada, British Columbia. So this is cool because I love it up there and have some family lineage from Canada. But so I want to ask you a question. You talk a lot about harm reduction. Can you clarify for people what you mean by harm reduction? Because it's not often used when we're talking about recovery, because you say the two go hand in hand.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, recovery is really, it's not always about the drugs, right? Like, I always say this, listen, if you're doing drugs, that's fine. But if drugs are doing you, then maybe we got to look at something, right? But, a lot of the times in today's day and age where the drugs are so toxic out there, that people first time experimental use and all these other aspects, you don't need a tolerance for this illicit drug supply. It'll just kill you dead. And so harm reduction comes in with its approach of meeting people where they're at and allowing them to have access to other safer alternatives than to the illicit drug supply. And to me, my recovery started years before I ever got sober. Like, I always had the desire to stop. It was just so freaking hard to get there. But that desire is what motivated me and drove me inside. It's like, hey, every time I relapsed, I didn't beat myself up. I just got back up and kept trying until I figured it out.
Right. Well, and is there at that time when you got sober, because you've been nearly 20 years sober now?
No, not that long. 8 years, though.
8 years. Okay. All right. So I misread something there. But was there the resources that were there available, let alone, it's great that you're out educating, because nothing is prevention like education.
Right. Well, hey, you know what? I wouldn't have recovery if I didn't have harm reduction services in my life. Like, I am walking, living proof that harm reduction kept me alive long enough to give me the ability to find a pathway to recovery. And there is no recovery in my life without harm reduction. So the two is like, running a relay race, the baton passing.
Yeah.
We're on the same team trying to do the same thing. We're just trying to save a life. And sometimes you have to understand with substance users is that's the challenge. And if it's driven by trauma, our substance use disorder or our addictions are driven by childhood trauma or trauma, we don't go actually and do enough to address the traumas of why people are using drugs in the first place. And so these are the challenges to that, where I say, listen, people don't recover when they're gone. They're dead. There's no more. That's it. And then the family has to live with that. Communities have to live with that. It's truly heartbreaking in our society of so many people that are losing their lives to, substance use disorder in today's day and age.
Yeah.
Guy, I kind of want to back up a little bit. So you said that you started your recovery before you got sober, it's a little different from what we're hearing, because, when we talk to a lot of people, they're okay with the fact that this is me now. I can't see myself quitting. This is how it is. So can you elaborate a little bit more? Like, what was going through your head during your addiction? Like, so you obviously knew it was bad. You obviously knew you wanted to get better. You just didn't, obviously the addiction overtook, but can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for me, the one thing is that, I tried bouts of treatments and had some success at sobriety. And what kept coming back was that underlying trauma. The trauma never got addressed. And so that is so painful for people. I mean, you know what? You're carrying a boulder of shame, like low self-worth, self-hatred. You have all these feelings that are going on that become so unbearable. And it's just like, screw this. Like, I need to distract. This is painful. I've always said that the voices that were in my head were the ones that were the screaming so loud that I just needed them to shut up. Yeah. And drugs did that. Drugs took that away. But that didn't mean that I wasn't trying to find something better. I mean, my life was miserable. I'm in the downtown east side of Vancouver for 2 decades, homeless, living in a 2-block radius, people walking by on the street, and I'm sitting on a piece of cardboard. You ask me how I'm doing. I'm looking at you like, well, it doesn't look like I'm enjoying myself, does it? Right. Like, so it's one of those things where, even though inside, I knew that I could figure it out. I just didn't have the time was on my side to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, you state on your website about your bio, grew up in a middle-class home, but addiction fell to you at a young age, and you've referred to trauma. Are you okay with going into some of those trauma things that led to it? I mean, when we say middle class, everybody, automatically thinks married mom and dad, the white picket fence, and a good scenario. But, you fell into addiction, gangs, and like you said, living on a 2-block radius in downtown for nearly 2 decades.
I mean, it's crazy. Like, obviously I dealt with, I think, verbal abuse, which a lot of people often don't attribute to that as being as destructive as other abuses. But verbal abuse to me was the thing that damaged me the worst, because you have a young mind that's growing up and being constantly told that it's garbage. And going into school, I was classified as hyper difficult and very hard to manage. Not anything to look at I didn't get diagnosed with anything. They just left it undiagnosed. It was diagnosed later in my life where I found out I have ADHD and a mild comprehension disorder. And I remember the therapist saying that to me. You know what I said to her? I had tears going down my face. I said, I've always believed I was stupid, and nobody's going to share that with somebody. You're going to hold, that was a big weight lifted off my shoulder. And she says, Guy, you're far from stupid. You're actually one of the smartest people I've ever met, because you had to navigate your life through having this undiagnosis. And I said, but everybody keeps saying it was the drugs. And she was saying, well, they didn't look deep enough. And that's where I think a lot of in our society, people just see the drugs and the action and, the behavior that comes from it. And we judge because of that, but we don't look deeper. What's the story? Why the drugs? And once we get there, we figure out, a lot of people have misdiagnosed dyslexia, ADHD, and OCD, other issues that have really hampered their lives. And the self-medication of the illicit street drugs was really that was my medication.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it sounds familiar as a dyslexic, still a struggle. I mean, shoot, we were talking with Charlie Sheen and he's like, yeah, I had this terrible stutter and got made fun of. And, you don't think about those kind of things oftentimes, let alone that incredibly powerful negative self-talk. Like you said, that voice that starts from those that are supposed to nurture and love us at a young age. And it creates so much negativity that when we talk to ourselves, which we do more than anyone else on the planet, that it's all negative and it's so self-destructive and self-loathing, and it just takes you to a bottom.
Yeah, I often say when I was 12 years old and I first actively started using substances, if I didn't do those drugs, I would have ended my life. Like that's the truth. And then when I look later on in life, here's the conflict though. As it's getting progressing and getting worse, those same drugs that saved my life are now trying to end my life. And it's like, oh my God, how do I let this go? It's kind of like that thing where you have that coping mechanism because it wasn't developed as a child. The drugs replaced all mechanisms. And to let that go to somebody, it leaves you exposed to the traumas, exposed to the abuse, the negative voices come back, and you feel like ending your life. And I tell you, the only way that I tried, like many treatment facilities, when I started to get success in my life, it was really through trauma therapy, EMDR therapy. And those therapies started to give me the understanding of the abuse and my relationship with those drugs. And I realized, oh my God, I'm learning coping skills here. Now it's the distraction isn't the drugs anymore. I'm trying to distract myself from using the drugs.
Right. Yeah. Talk a little bit more about EMDR, maybe for people that are listening or watching on the YouTube channel don't know about it. It's a pretty interesting form that goes hand in hand with trauma therapy.
Yeah, it's just a rapid eye movement therapy that's actually supposed to repair your coping skills in your mind to actually give you new skills to deal with the past traumas. And you know what? It's honestly, when I first started doing it, I'm thinking it's almost like going to a Jedi fight, with the lightsaber going back and forth and you following it around the room and you're just kind of like going, is this really going to frickin' work? And it did. And I was just, it's unbelievable. It really started to give me the ability to start to cope with things in the past. And it's just like, it's almost like water off a duck's back. Really what I found in my recovery journey is, listen, I was going to need some forgiveness because I caused a lot of damage. Right.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really, I have to have that same forgiveness for even the people that wronged me. Right. It's not okay to pass on traumas, right? Because that's what happens. It's unaddressed and we just continue to pass it on down the line and everybody gets hurt because of it.
Yeah. People don't realize or maybe those that are listening to it's great that you talk about that to help understand that as those in active addiction, there's not an intent to cause trauma. It's just, as we often say, we're lying to ourselves already, let alone we're going to lie to the fucking world because, there's no alternative but other than to manipulate. And it's not that we aim to be dishonest. It's just our brain to go to our chemicals and get that reaction. That's where it's totally activated. Like every freaking resource goes that way.
Yeah, it's crazy just how your mind will work. It's just like, you wake up, it's like, for me with the cocaine and the heroin is like, my whole life, it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job. There's no ability to do anything outside of that. Like your whole life is using to not be sick, to get more, to use, to rip people off, to do whatever it takes to get more and to continue this pattern. And that keeps you trapped as well. It's like this revolving spin cycle that winds up with parole violations, penitentiary stints, and rehab facilities. And once you get caught up in that, I mean, it's very, very hard to get out of. Like you really have to battle. And then society doesn't make it easier with how we view people who use drugs. And then the other barriers is trying to access a service to get off those drugs. Right. I mean, we're talking, there is, you probably have a better chance at winning the Lotto Max than to trying to get out with the services that are available. It's just that challenging.
Yeah. Well, you talk about prison. Did you have any times where you were put into any sort of incarceration and had to detox within incarceration?
Oh, that is like, I mean, you have to remember when now with the harm reduction services that are in place now, I mean, a lot of it's a lot easier for people.
Sure.
But you go to prison, right? For you're a heroin user, you give you a cup of water and a couple of Tylenol and some Gatorade and tell you to, drink fluids. You're gonna, and you go in withdrawal. My withdrawal periods were longer than my stints in prison sometimes. I'd get out still in withdrawal, like after 35 days. I haven't slept a wink. Yeah, it's just it's so punishing. And then you have to, as a substance user, because as former substance users, we've always had to manipulate the system, right?
Yeah.
So for me, when I went to prison, if you drink alcohol, right, and you say you drink alcohol, they give you Valium for 2 weeks. So I said, well, hell, I drink 240s a day and I use heroin. So that means, okay, medical detox for the alcohol will give you the Valium for a couple of weeks, which subsided the withdrawal. But they wouldn't give you anything for the heroin. And so we have this hierarchy of what drug user you are. If you're alcohol, because it's socially acceptable, okay, we'll help you. Oh, heroin, not acceptable. You're going to suffer. And to me, that just doesn't make sense because it's, it doesn't show people the ability to get better. So people for what substance they're using, which doesn't make them feel good about reaching out, asking for help. I mean, those are the challenges that exist and why I don't think we have so much of an addiction issue. I think we have an untreated trauma issue.
Where you are now may not be where you came from. The choices you make today may spiral out of control or spin you in the right direction. Discover a riveting, true story of how Carlos Vieira nearly destroyed his life and lived to tell about it. Stand up, stand firm, believe, make it happen, and live through the madness. Knocking doors down along the way. And don't miss others telling their powerful stories on our podcast. Visit kddmediacompany.com.
That part of mental health that it takes place in recovery, it's kind of the areas that we focus on. Of course, spiritual, which some people have a struggle with that one, but not only your mental health and your physical health as well, that all have to come intact, and people really ignore that mental part. Oftentimes they think, okay, maybe, I'm dealing with the spiritual. Hey, I get up, I go to work, I eat regularly. But if you're not really touching that trauma area, you leave yourself really susceptible to relapses and going back down that dark road.
Yeah. And if it's a chronic relapsing health condition, like we say it is, it's kind of like, then why don't we do more to help people when they relapse, right? We're kind of like, they get that, I mean, it's tremendous. I mean, I used to remember the shame that I had already felt from going back. Oh, it's just, so there's support for people that are in active recovery. But if you relapse, your kind of support's, it's shaky, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know. We can't have you over here anymore. Like, we attach this thing. And the majority of people who use drugs, they don't struggle with a substance use disorder. They're just people who use drugs on occasion. And unfortunately, even for them, with the supply the way it is, even here in Canada, it's all fentanyl now. There isn't heroin on the market. It's fentanyl, synthetic, and it's changed everything on how you have to approach people that are struggling with an addiction or a substance use disorder. Really, you use, you die. You go to recovery, you relapse, you can die. I mean, the risk now for margin of error is that, nobody going into treatment should ever be asked to leave without having the proper supports in place, because we expect people to go to a treatment facility for 4 months. It's kind of like walking them to the end of a cliff and saying, okay, we're done here. It's like, but there's no bridge. Yeah. Jump, right?
Yeah. Well, we see it a lot in the Central Valley where we're located at in California, and the fentanyl just, getting worse and worse and worse with the illicit drugs. We're seeing that rise with teenagers and, like you said, middle class homes and everything. People always have that perception that the addict is the individual under the bridge or downtown in the 2-block radius sitting on the cardboard. And oftentimes it's the kid 2 blocks down or 2 doors down from mom and dad.
Yeah, totally. I mean, majority of our deaths out here are in private residence. So that's could be a house like, that people own, right?
Yeah.
It's not people dying on the streets. It's people are dying alone. And there's a couple of factors with that. Well, number one, the drug supply is, toxic, but number two and number three is bad drug policy and the stigma that surrounds it all. I mean, the stigma is just as deadly as the drugs themselves. It drives people into isolation. Why do I have to go rent a motel to go get high for a couple of days when, if I was, allowed to go and, or I felt comfortable in front of other people? Well, no, you can't, because you might lose your kids, you might lose your job, you might lose all these things. They might throw you in prison. And that's just the risk to reward with that is just, no, I'll just isolate. And then, I tell people, well, you could die alone. What about your kids? What about your wife? Well, I won't have to deal with when I'm gone. I mean, that's tragic to hear that come out of somebody's mouth.
Yeah. Well, and touching on that, you speaking on your TED Talk, which, people Google guy's name, you'll go to his website. You talk about a firefighter that you knew, workplace injury. And we've talked with, athletes that fell into using opioids and then going to the legal market and, workplace occupational hazards. But firefighter, you knew, broke his back and it took off from there.
Yeah. I mean, here's a guy that is like, serves the public, will do anything to protect the public, right?
Yeah.
Runs into a building to save somebody, falls out the window, breaks his back. You know what I mean? Then gets prescribed opioids for the pain, but then after that gets cut off. And this guy had a beautiful childhood, all the great upbringings of everything. He just became physically dependent, and the pain that happened from that was so unbearable. And they cut him off those pain meds. And then he had to go buy illicit fentanyl off the street, which opened up a whole new can of worms. The only choice that guy made was running into that building to save that person's life. Right. He didn't make a choice to have all these other issues come with that, but that's what happens. And cutting off, even pain patients is killing them. I mean, these are people that are physically struggling with pain, and doctors, cutting people off. I mean, this is just fueling more people to the illicit drug supply. It's like, listen, at what point do we say the way the laws and policies are in place aren't working? Well, I think it's gone from defeat to debacle.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing it here in the U.S. as well. It's definitely no different. Let's jump ahead to your last time when you were finally done in the treatment process for you, because, man, 8 years, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the last 8 years, like, listen, this is what my whole life from 1983 to 2013 using drugs, right? And survived the first public health emergencies, dueling public health emergencies in British Columbia, which was HIV, where 1 in 4 were infected in the downtown east side with HIV. That overdose crisis that happened in the 90s. 5 osteomyelitis bone infections, 4 in my left leg, 1 in my back where I actually had to learn how to walk again, 20 years of being homeless on the street, and then 6 overdoses that started when fentanyl started hitting the market in 2012 to 2013, and had to be brought back to life 6 times just to survive that. And then to pick up with 1 set of clothes on my back, no support, go to a transitional house outside of the area. And it was just basically a house like, listen, you can live here. If you use drugs, we're going to kick you out. And you got to figure out your life. and get into an outpatient program and start doing trauma therapy. And in 8 years, like, I mean, today, I mean, I have a beautiful wife. I have 3 beautiful kids. I own my own house. I have a career job. I have a life that, understands like my purpose and passion, and all that in 8 years. So, and also too, well, we laugh about it. Some people laugh about it. I was on welfare from the age of 16 to 45. And, now I have a career job that pays me really well. And, own my own company that pays me really well to speak. And the great thing about it is that I don't care about all that. I care about passing on, because everything I have in my life is a direct result of giving back and helping others. And so when you do that and understand that, I tell you, like, you want to get out of your self-centeredness. I mean, I was so cold inside. I had to do something, and it felt so good to help somebody else. That made me feel good, and that's where the self-esteem and the self-worth started to come back. It's very hard to repair that when you just believe you're a bag of crap for your whole life, and then to repair that way, it's been the biggest gift of my life. I mean, and I get to relive my childhood through my 3 beautiful kids, which is crazy.
Yeah, no, as a father too, I know what you're talking about. It is a gift. It is a trip. But being that you go out and you publicly speak and you're so vulnerable, how is it that you and the missus approach talking about your life with the kids? Or are they too young at this point that you haven't really broached that? Because I know that's something that my kids are now close to teenage years, so I'm very open with them about my substance stuff, as well as their mom has been too, and some of the stupid stuff we've done because of alcohol or drug use.
Yeah, we're going to be those parents that definitely, they're too young right now, but if they were to ask questions even at this age, we're ready. We teach our kids, it's about learning moments for us, because a lot of the times we go into the downtown east side and give back. We'll go down there and hand out food in the community. And my daughter, who's 4, she sees a guy sleeping on the street. And I remember her saying to me, Dad, why is the man sleeping on the street? And I just, there's a teaching moment saying, hey, listen, like, not everybody has the privilege of having a place to live. And there's nothing wrong with this person because they're sleeping there. It's just a circumstance in some people's lives that, the circumstance is the system. But, you're trying to explain this, that, hey, this is not a bad person. This is a good person. They just have a harder life, and you have a privileged life. Next time we came down there, we parked in the same area and we were walking down the street. And she didn't see the man there. And the first thing my daughter said to me, which knows that kids are absorbing information, she said, Dad, the man's not sleeping there. He must have gone home. And I looked at her and I just said, man, if the world thought like you, Gia, we'd be in a really good spot. But those are those teaching moments that will always be open with our kids. My kids, they don't even notice that I have tattoos. They've never pointed them out. You know what they see? They see Dad. And that gets skewed as we get older, right? Then we start to see the differences in other people. And then it becomes these biases that we develop and we start judging people. And so, a lot of us as adults could actually learn from a child and say,
sure,
man, they're so innocent.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's that beautiful thing, like where I'll see my daughter playing with her friends in the neighborhood, all different genders, nationalities, and everything else. It's just like, it's so cool because they just want to have fun and enjoy each other for who they are, and be themselves. It's like, what point do we start fucking that up,
Yeah, my 2 nephews, I don't think they notice any of my tattoos, but I'll tell you what, the older lady at the supermarket does as she clenches her purse. I'm like, lady, relax, all right? These arms cost more than that purse did. It's okay.
I say that same thing. I've actually, sometimes the funny thing is I'll walk into a store and I'll see floor walkers start following me all over the place.
Oh yeah, same here, buddy. Yeah.
And you know what I love about that? I love it because live a life of integrity. And when I'm paying for it, I'm hoping that somebody else got out with a boatload.
You know what I like to do, Guy? Just not completely off topic, but I'll go to the store and I tried on a jacket. This happened one time. I was trying on a jacket and then I noticed a security guard like kind of going like this, you know, peeking back and forth. And I'm like, is this dude serious? Like, okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to wear the jacket and I'm going to continue to shop. And as I go up to the cash register, I said, this is your guys' jacket. Can you scan it? I want the security guard to follow me outside. Because, you know, stereotyping me or whatever. So the cashier was in on it. She was laughing. She goes, yeah, no problem. Scanned it, paid for it. And then he stopped me right when I got outside. And I'm like, there's the receipt. Quit judging me, fool. I just like
that's great.
Oh, heck. So going out speaking, especially with the youth, you said you really, that was kind of a really good passion area because really, you know, education is a big part of prevention. And, you know, you go out and tell your story vulnerably, which that's the greatest thing. Like you said, if it's a cop that comes in there, well, don't do drugs. You could end up seeing me, you know, it's like, no, you could destroy your life. You could end up on the streets for 20 years. And if you're feeling the things I felt, guess what? You can deal with it now. You don't have to deal with it 20 years later. Do you have any cool success stories of speaking with any youth that, you know, out that you really recall?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know, the crazy thing is I go and do a talk for an hour, right? And before COVID, there was like an auditorium of like 900 kids. And then there's a lineup of kids that want to talk. There's counselors that are in the school that nobody talks to. Right? Like I could roll in and tell and share the story. And we're talking about, you know, kids, listen, the biggest thing that they're trying to figure out is social acceptance. Then, you know, they hear of my involvement with gangs as a youth and then the drugs and all that kind of stuff. They come up to me and talk to me about themselves and their struggles. And they're impacted by the same things we are as adults, the stigma, the shame, the isolation. They're dealing with that at a very young age and they don't feel supported. And I'm like, hey, listen, I don't care what your counselors say here. I'm going to tell you that if you need any help, you can reach out. They reach out through my website. I had a real good success story of a 16-year-old kid that overdosed. He was brought back to life. Luckily for him, he overdosed at a SkyTrain, which is basically like our subway system here.
Sure, yeah.
He brought back to life by the transit police and a couple outreach workers. And then the school, when they contacted me, we came in, I did a talk and he wanted to talk after. And he said he really has a hard time dealing with the withdrawal. And I was like, oh God, it's terrible. So we got him on, you know, I gave him a bunch of services to try Suboxone. He got on Suboxone and man, up and goes. He's coming to school. He's doing better. He's not using illicit drugs anymore. And this is kind of like one of those miracle drugs that, you know, stops you from being so hell bent on using Xanax or fentanyl. And, you know, he's doing well. I also had a family reach out for, and they wanted to do somewhat, I'm not an interventionist. I don't like the word, but they called me and said, would you come in here and help? And I said, listen, if you're going to want me to come and help, this is what I'm willing to do. I'll lay out a bunch of options. And one of those options was, do you need treatment? Like, do you need to go into a physically treatment center? And she didn't want to do that. And I said, and she said, what other options are there? I said, well, you know, if your parents had money, which they did, you can pay for counseling. So they started with that, but they also, I said, but there is an option of Suboxone to get on so you don't have to use the street drugs. She got on it. 6 months later, anyway, the family just reached out a few months ago and said, hey, it's been 6 months. She just got her first freaking job. She's a completely different person. She's not accessing. She just takes this pill once a day and she's just good. And I said, yeah, who cares? That's amazing. And a lot of the times in recovery, we have this thing where if somebody's taking a medication, oh, well, then they're really not in recovery because they're not abstaining from all substances. I just say, screw that. If somebody takes one pill a day so that they don't go and destroy not only their lives, but the lives around them, and if that pill can do that and give people the ability to go get a job, be a dad to their kids or a mom to their kids and show up for family events. And I said, then that's recovery to me. Like, you know, people aren't using dirty street drugs. That's recovery.
5150 is power. The power to overcome. The power to persevere. The power to set your life on a course for success. When you're faced with the challenges life throws at you, you focus and do what is needed to go beyond what is required. So stand up, stand firm, believe, make it happen, and live through the madness, knocking doors down along the way. We are 5150.
I think there's oftentimes a stigma, and I've talked with people about this when it comes to the term recovery, that they look at it as a going back to some point in life. And I'd really like to be a part of changing that conversation, that what it is recovery is allowing you from the point forward to create a life moving forward. And those circumstances or whatever it is, you know, for me, it's alcohol. Can't touch it. I'm allergic to it. Other drugs never had a big impact on me. Not that I go and use them. Once I eliminated the alcohol, I don't have the desire. Right. But, you know, for some people, you know, it might be illicit drugs, but they're okay to at a family barbecue, have a beer and call it good. Or like you said, it's somebody that is, you know, hey, this pill, if we had a heart condition, you wouldn't judge a person that has a heart condition for taking a pill every damn day. Exactly. You'd be like, hey, Bob, did you take your pill? Oh, shoot, thanks. Yeah, I'm 10 minutes late. No big deal. But we do it when it comes to mental health or addiction. We're like, well, you did that and you use this. It's like, nah, you know, if I was at that point, there are people that when they come off alcohol, it's so bad that they do take a medication that if they drank, it would make them so sick. Fortunately, I didn't have that situation, but we sit and we judge people over and over. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And just remember how hard it was to get into your recovery. You know, I always say this to people. I've just never forgotten where I've come from and just the battle that it took to get here. I mean, literally, I had to battle. It's hard to do any living when you're only focused on surviving. Like, we should be allowing people to thrive. And, you know, when I got into recovery, one of the things that I was working in a private abstinence-based treatment center. And I mean, you know, I was very grateful that they hired me because, you know, really, we punish people for having a criminal record. Our substance use and addiction, we get criminalized for it for the rest of our lives. People ask me, like, you know, when I got my first job, like, well, what jobs have you had? Well, I worked for Boston Pizza in 1986. It's 2014. Yeah, I kind of got derailed somewhere, right? And, you know, somebody had to take a shot. Like, I mean, people look at that and go, oh my God, we can't hire him. There's no experience. There's no nothing. My experience really for me was my lived experience, which is the equivalent to a master's degree that somebody goes to university. But I always tell them I go one up on them. I say, well, listen, have you ever used drugs? No, I never had problematic substance use. Well, then, okay, for your master's degree, then if you don't think that my lived experience is valid, then I think for your master's degree, you should go tank your life, go use heroin and cocaine for the next 5 years, then go run the gauntlet of methadone and other treatments, then go into treatments and try to do that, then get into recovery and change your life, then I'll validate your master's degree. And they just look at me and they go, I know yours is pretty good too.
You kind of lived your shit, you know. This isn't theory, people. This is actual practice here.
Yeah, it's like, and believe me, then you understand the barriers that are in place. There's nothing like understanding the barriers when you're going through it and living through it and trying to access those services as to somebody that says, oh yeah, there's barriers, but don't have to live through going through those barriers. It's tremendously challenging for a person. Listen, if it takes like 6 months for you to actively go through all the loopholes just to get the support that you need, and then it fails, you know, It's not the treatment that's blamed. It's you, the substance user, that's blamed because you're not ready. And I'm like, well, when does the treatment become accountable for it not being ready for the person? Like, how is that? Like, we blame people. You know, it's this thing with substance use and mental health that we just blame the person. If this was cancer and cancer came back, are we going to punish them for that? Oh, there you go. Cancer came back. Like, come on. Like, you know, so, but we do this. It's the only health condition that we do this to. And if our society moving forward wants to do anything different, then it has to look at the whole structure of the system and start to say, hey, yeah, maybe it is the treatment we need to look at. You know, treatment centers will say they're 82% success rate, right?
Right.
I'm like, well, what's success? I didn't commit 82% of my crimes when I was in prison. Is that successful? Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like success is really in the eye of the beholder, not the treatment center. It's like, well, what happened to the person's life? Well, they completed treatment. Yeah, so what? I completed my jail sentence. That didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Like, really what happens is the treatment didn't give the proper tools for the person to make it through to the next steps and the continuum of care that exists after that. We don't get people jobs. We don't work on people's trauma. Their sole focus is you use drugs here, write a set of steps and do this and you'll be better. And then go to a meeting every day at 7:00. It's like, that's it.
Yeah, no, it's pretty ridiculous. And for some people, it is more simple, but those complex, deeper things, it's just not. And
Yeah.
you know, I know for me, I have to, especially during this lockdown pandemic, boy, it was tough. And there's so many people. I mean, we've seen celebrities relapse, and of course the thousands and thousands that are out there that we haven't heard about because they're not a high profile name.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been, you know, familiar foes to people who struggle with addiction, right? Isolation, right? This pandemic is just, we're going to have a severe mental health and addiction crisis even after the pandemic because of just all the people that, you know, struggle with isolation, loneliness. It's just so familiar for us. And, you know, one of the things too, like I just tell people is find your path. Like if that's Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, or Harm Reduction Services, well, I don't care what it is, man. I just don't want people to die. And I want people to get better. And I want people to say to me, this is what worked for me. Because not always what works for one set of groups of people is going to work for somebody else. And we need to be okay with that and saying, hey, listen, if this person has to take a pill, they have to show up here at the meeting. I used to say this to people, or people used to say this to me. I was on medication for about the first 9 months while I started my recovery journey. And why wouldn't I be? Because I used drugs for frickin' 31 years. And people used to say, they didn't judge me for that. You know what they said? Oh my God, he's at a meeting. He's not sticking a needle in his neck. This is amazing.
Yeah.
You know, and it was those things that said, you know, you hang around people. I always tell people, if you're going to hang around a group of people, hang around people that are far more successful than yourself. Absolutely. And when you do that, it raises the bar in your own life. And that's where I went into this thing. I wasn't going to get just better. I was going to make changes. Yeah. And I had dreams. Like, I mean, I remember when I met my wife, like I needed somebody. I just needed, you know, it's kind of like the Grinch, where he didn't hate Christmas. You know, he just found out that he needed love from people. And that's really what, yeah. I didn't hate the world. I just needed somebody to love and somebody to love me back. Yeah. And my wife is that continuum of care that really taught me how to live. I remember getting into recovery, and this is how long that I've been, you know, not doing normal stuff. I remember trying the toaster. Right? The toaster had a side button that you push and the toast would go down, but I was looking for, you know, the thing. I'm staring at this thing, and I'm like, and the guy comes by and he goes, oh yeah, hey, that toaster got me too. And I'm like, yeah, how does it work? And he goes, oh, there's a button right here, push the button. And I was like, oh my God, technology. And the toast went down, and I thought, why? And he goes, oh, that's a great toaster. But he didn't shame me for that, right?
What is
You know
this
what I mean?
contraption?
Yeah. Hey, when I got a job with the health authority, they said this, hey, have you ever worked on do you know how to use a laptop? I said, well, no, I've been in the downtown east side for 20 years. I know what laptops to sell and which ones are good, but I don't know how to use it actually. They were like, oh, we're going to hire a tech specialist to work with you so you understand that. But that wasn't somebody trying to, and for me with my comprehension disorder, is I have to learn through seeing things. You can't just give me a bunch of directions and hand me a piece of paper. I have to learn visually. So you have to show me how it's done.
I'm the exact same way. I like, oh, there's directions, read them. I'm like, no, just show me. Like, I'm not reading that. That's going to take too long. I need to see somebody do it. I'm a visual learner.
Yeah. And that's when I discovered that, really my therapist was the one that brought it out. So how I see things, like, I couldn't understand certain words. Like how I do a test is I don't read the book. I read the questions on the test and then look for the answers in the book.
Sure.
Because I can read a book, but I just can't remember reading it. Yeah. And so for me, I have to physically do it a different way. And this is my learning disabilities that I've had to function with without having any support. And so a lot of my challenges really came from that undiagnosed learning disabilities.
Yeah. And I can relate to that too. It's funny hearing you guys talk about this. This guy gives me shit because I'm a little kid. It's one of the things I found in recovery was going back to doing the things I enjoy as a kid, and that's Legos. So it's a visual instruction. If it was written out, I would mess that up. But there's the picture, match the picture. You're good, buddy.
Yeah.
So it's those
even in trauma therapy, it's not all about dealing with your traumas. It's about remembering what you used to love.
Yeah.
And my therapist was like, what did you used to love? And I was like, oh God, like, I used to love playing ping pong. And I go, well, it's a pandemic, can't really do that. And then I remembered an old hobby. I used to collect hockey cards and baseball cards. And I said, man, I used to love doing that. She says, why don't you start? Why don't you do it again? So now really one of the things I discovered was my old passion to collect hockey cards and baseball cards again, and how fun it is. And so I this is what I do with my kids now. And it's so amazing, man.
Yeah, I'm loving the photo behind you there. You get the guys playing puck. What is that picture of in the background? Hopefully people that aren't watching on the YouTube, you'd have to see on YouTube. But guy's got a great photo behind him.
That's Bobby Orr.
Okay.
The Bobby Orr iconic, Game 7 winning goal scorer, dramatic Boston Bruins. I'm not a Bruins fan, so this is my father-in-law's office. So
awesome.
Because
that's not mine. Kids, that's not mine.
Yeah.
Don't saddle you with the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan, so I'm probably even more hated than being a Bruins fan. So.
Yeah, my daughter was really into hockey there for a little bit. She, whatever reason, hooked on the Maple Leafs, and it was like, okay, kid, so we went to a couple of games, and they're like, this is cool. I'm like, I know, I've never been to hockey either.
Hockey in person's a blast. When you go to the games, that's an absolute blast for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean anything like that it's really good. So that's the thing what we forget too when we're using substances. We often forget the things that we used to enjoy. Like, I just lost those memories because of layers of trauma and burying all the feelings. We forget the things that we used to love doing, but that's part of recovery too. It's repairing that and remembering, oh my God, I used to love doing this. Let's start that again. My wife actually, unfortunately, the hockey card stuff is kind of expensive now. And my wife has given me a limit to where it's like, okay, shut her down, pal. It's like,
cards alone are expensive now. Like my nephews, they'd get into basketball. We'd collect football cards and stuff. Not only are they hard to find, but when you do find them, they are getting pricey. They're getting up there.
Oh, it's crazy. Like, I mean, yeah, I mean, well, I always said to my wife, I've dropped, probably millions of dollars on dope. So if I'm going to drop $1 million on hockey cards, it might not be a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Especially, there's some investments that I've made in some cards for sure for my kids. Anything I do is really for my kids. I mean, for their future, and repairing relationships
Sure.
is always those things that I do moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Real quick before we get to some fun random questions, Guy, I know for me, my tattoos, I'm not as covered as you or Mikey for that matter, but they have a personal meaning. Anything personal about the ones that you've gotten? Because you got what, full left sleeve and then one on the neck too?
Yeah, well, my wife.
Oh, you're brave. You got your wife's name on you?
I know. I got my wife here. This is a friend that passed of a drug overdose, a good friend of mine. So that's the memorial. This is kind of these were all done in the penitentiary, by the way. So
oh, shit.
All single needle, huh?
All single needle, yeah.
That's tough.
That's right. Boy,
yeah.
Not only is it tough, but that probably took forever. I mean, I'm sure you had free time in there, obviously.
Yeah,
but
not much
needle, man, that takes forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Even I know a lot of tattoo artists as well. They've all said, who was the guy that did the tattoos? I'd love to hire him.
Sure. Sure.
And I mean, there's a lot of talented people in the prison system that do like amazing artwork. So, this is kind of a lot of the pain and suffering on this. I haven't finished this one yet, but this one is going to be kind of like the evolution of like a phoenix rising from the ashes type thing.
Very cool. Yeah.
It's going to be that kind of like the redemption arm of the past. So, and that's, that's the meaning that it's always had for me. So.
And that is really crazy too. Like I had a buddy who was in jail for about 6 years, and he came out, covered his chest, half sleeve, and his stomach, and they're beautiful tattoos. Like they were done really well. And it's like, wow, that guy was in jail with you. And he's like, oh yeah, I knocked all this. It's like, yeah, better than mine.
Yeah. I mean, the guy that did mine, he was a professional, and he was amazing.
Yeah.
And he was such a good guy too. And obviously when you're in prison too, one thing I always tell people, my wife says when I don't want to answer a question, I'll answer, I had tattoos before they were cool. And she'll look at me like, why would you say that? Like, I go, well, that just throws everybody off. That's not the question. I'm like, I know. And then people really don't say anything after that. They're like, I don't know what he's talking about, but
Guy, I gotta ask you, did your tattoo artist say anything about getting your wife's name as you were doing it?
No, this one was done not in the penitentiary. This is the one that I got done on the outside.
Right. Did he like say anything about it? Like, oh, you sure? Or was he kind of, because I got my ex's name tattooed on me, and my ex was with me at the time. And as she went to the bathroom, the tattoo artist said, don't worry, I can easily cover this up. And I was just like, all right. And it worked out perfectly because 2 months later we broke up. So, life lessons, right?
Yeah, I think for me, when my wife and me, we'd met through her father, who was in recovery as well.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
And how we met, I'd been, struggling with substances, but when we met, and when she saw me at the transitional house when I left Surrey, she came and showed up at the house. I wrote her a letter saying, hey, I'm going to try to get my life together. She showed up. And I remember when we went for coffee, and she said, like, are you serious? Like, I'm all in on you if you're all in on changing your life. And I said, well, I haven't had any better offers lately, so I'm going to take you up on that.
Oh,
got to take her up on that.
Yeah, and the rest is kind of history. So
yeah, married, 3 kids later. It seemed to have worked out for you, right?
Not too bad for a guy that was homeless and struggled with addiction for decades, right? Not too bad.
I think you did pretty damn good. Guy, can you tell a little bit more about how people can get a hold of you? We'll put all that in the description of the podcast as well, but a little more on it. And maybe if they want to inquire, not about just reaching out to you, but hopefully, knock on wood, when this pandemic opens up, about getting out there and speaking at their institution.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can always go to my website, which is just guyfelicella.com. Or you can, DM me on Twitter at guyfelicella. Email me, whatever. There's a direct link on the website to email. You can do that. And obviously, for me, I'd love to come and speak in places around the globe. I mean, obviously, with the pandemic, it's actually helped me a little bit in the sense that I've been doing a lot of meetings in the UK, Scotland, even United States, across Canada, just file like this. So those are all options as well. But yeah, really trying to give people the understanding that, hey, guess what? People do recover when they're supported. And let's change the narrative of substance use and addiction and make it to a way where it's presentable and accessible for people to access.
Absolutely. All right. Are you ready for some fun random questions?
Let's do it.
You're up first, Mikey.
Guy, if they were to make a movie about you, who would you cast to play yourself?
Oh, Danny Trejo.
Oh, Trejo.
Trejo.
Yeah.
I love Danny Trejo. That's awesome.
Yeah. We were doing interviews in LA and ate at his taqueria.
I was going to say, he's got a bomb Mexican restaurant in the Grove in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think he's just a class act.
For sure.
He would be cool to speak with as well. All right. Well, no, you already talked about maybe your guilty pleasure being trading cards. Pet peeves. Do you have any pet peeves?
The reply all email.
I always forget to push that one.
Okay. That you hate reply all emails, or that people don't reply all?
No, they keep replying all. It's like they ask a question specifically to one person, and then you get this reply all thread that happens all day, and you're like, it was specifically sent to you, not to me. You reply back to the sender, not to everybody. We don't need to hear any more of your chain of events of email. And it'd be like one email, like, yes, email, no, maybe, question mark. And it's just to the death of me. My wife always says, well, your life's pretty freaking good if that's what you're complaining about.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
If that's the worst problem of the day.
Yeah.
All right. If you were stuck on a deserted island, what one movie and one album would you take with you?
Oh, well, one album. Oh man, I guess I gotta go with AC/DC's Back in Black.
Love it.
Yeah.
And then one movie, Usual Suspects.
Oh, that's so good. That is such a good movie. I got a story about that, but that's another time. Maybe after we're done with the podcast, no one else would care. If you could have dinner with just one person, living or not, who would it be and why?
Well,
anybody.
One person.
Anybody. Famous, not famous, anybody you want.
I think I'd have to have. I'd love to have dinner with my grandmother, who passed.
Mm-hmm.
Just because she died in 2013, just 6 months into my recovery, and just to have the ability to she knew that she witnessed the first birth of our son.
Mm-hmm.
And then she died like a few days after that. We have one picture of her holding him. I think it would be because my grandmother always said, like, you're going to do big things one day. And she never judged me for using drugs. So if I could have dinner with her, just say, this is what freaking happened.
Oh,
what you said has happened, Grandma.
Grandmas know, man. Grandmas know.
Yeah.
One more, Mikey?
Yeah, let's do one more. All right. Okay. Okay. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Like of all superheroes.
Sure. Or even if you got one you've made up that hasn't been presented yet. Hey, we're copywriting that, by the way. Marvel, DC, don't come and steal what guys come up with.
They probably already own it.
Yeah.
I'd probably just that if you could just have a button that you could push that would just stop people from talking.
Wow, I had no idea how much alike you and I were, man. As far as reply emails, I hate people talking too.
It just like hit the mute button or just like stop them all together. Huh?
Yeah, I just said to you the other day, remember? What are you doing, Mikey? I'm trying to find the mute button.
No, but just mute them, and then until you unmute them, like they can't talk to anybody.
Love it. Hit mute and get rid of the remote. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, shoot. We would unmute them, Guy. We would unmute
eventually. Maybe. Guy, we always like to leave the guests with the last word, anything that they want to lend to that's inspirational or even to challenge folks or let them know that, if they're suffering, someone that they love is, or just coming through recovery, what you would have to say to them.
I think the best thing I realized in my life was as I got to a point, all the stuff that I was suppressing and holding down is that I didn't reach out soon enough to talk about it. And to have that ability, like, don't feel the shame. It's okay to ask for help. Don't let your ego and your pride get in the way from stopping you from reaching out and receiving the help that you need. Because oftentimes we of how we've been treated in the past will hinder us from the ability to stop reaching out in the future. And just listen, if you're struggling, it's okay. Like, reach out to a person that you can talk to and accept the support so that you can improve the quality of your life, and tell them, what you need and what you see to move forward and what would work for you. And if you keep doing that, you're going to talk to the right person that's going to help you.
Absolutely. Well, Guy Felicella, thank you, good sir. This has been a real pleasure, and we definitely appreciate your time.
No, hey guys, it was a blast. Awesome. Keep up the great work, and anytime you guys need anything, please reach out. And thanks for sending me those gifts. I'm truly humbled to be here, and I hope this inspires other people to make some changes in their lives to be better people as well, on both sides, people with substance use and people who view them.
Right, absolutely. Congrats on the 8 years too.
Thanks, my friends. You guys have a great day.
All right, Guy.